A very good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all the participants joining us today from across all the industries and regions. And thank you for taking out the time to be part of today's webinar, which is the reuse imperative from mandate to execution for brand owners under the Plastic Waste Management Rules 2016. My name is Arushi Thakur, and I will be moderating today's session. And we are extremely pleased to see such strong participation from brand owners, producers, packaging stakeholders, and sustainability and circularity professionals also, who are all trying to understand one of the most important transitions that is happening in India's plastic packaging regulatory ecosystem today, which is the transition from linear packaging systems to reuse-oriented circular models. Now, as many of you already know, the reuse mandate has now moved from being a policy discussion to becoming a practical compliance requirement for brand owners under the plastic waste management rules. And with the latest amendments and evolving CPCB expectations, organizations are now required to think beyond EPR fulfillment and start preparing for actual implementation, reporting, traceability, and also operational execution. Now, today's webinar has been specifically to bridge exactly that gap, the gap between understanding the law and understanding how reuse can actually work on ground. So whether you are just beginning to understand the mandate or you are already evaluating reuse models within your organization, this session will help provide both regulatory clarity and practical industry sites. So now before we begin the technical discussion, I would like to take a minute to introduce ReCirculytics and the work we are doing. So ReCirculytics was founded with the vision of building a focused EPR consulting and technology practice for India's evolving circular economy landscape. So we work across multiple notified waste streams, including plastic packaging, battery waste, e-waste, waste tires, and used oil, and all the upcoming ones as well. And we also provide end-to-end supports across EPR registration and compliance, annual return filings, transaction and fulfillment advisory, packaging assessments, EPR credits, procurement strategy, and your EPR ETP support, and as well as compliance technology and digital reporting system. The broader objective is to help organizations build compliance systems that are not only legally aligned, but also operationally scalable. So these are the services that we are helping with: compliance, consultancy, credits, and technology. Now, with that said, I would like to, brief you on what is the webinar agenda. So today's webinar will broadly cover 5 major areas. First, we will decode the reuse mandate and understand what the law actually says and who it exactly applies to. Second, we will discuss the compliance roadmap, which includes your targets, timelines, carry forward provisions, and also the reporting requirements on the portal. Third, we will move from compliance into execution and discuss how organizations can actually begin building reuse systems that work operationally. Fourth, we will look at real-world industry examples, specifically from sectors such as paints, oils, and chemicals. And finally, we will conclude with a Q&A session along with a discussion on how organizations can build the compliance execution bridge with the support of ecosystem partners. So now, to begin with, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker for today's session, Mr. Sujain Jain, who is founder of ReCirculytics. So Sujain is a first attempt chartered accountant and one of the early professionals working extensively in India's EPR compliance ecosystem. Over the years, he has supervised numerous registrations and annual return filings and has worked deeply across regulatory reporting, EPR credit management, digital compliance systems, and circularity-focused advisory. Prior to founding ReCirculytics, he worked with Fortune 500 companies and global packaging leaders, helping organizations navigate practical compliance and sustainability strategies. He is also a well-recognized industry speaker and regularly contributes to conversations around EPR implementation, regulatory developments, and circular economy systems. Today, Sujan will help us navigate the legal and regulatory dimensions of the reuse mandate and explain what brand owners need to understand from a compliance perspective. Our second speaker for today is Mr. Rahul Juare, Director at 3R Solutions. 3R Solutions has been actively working on practical reuse and circular packaging systems, especially in areas such as take-back logistics, cleaning and quality assurance, traceability systems, and reusable industrial packaging solutions. Their work is particularly relevant because they are not just discussing the reuse theoretically, they are actively operationalizing the reuse ecosystem on the ground. And as we will see in the second half of today's session, 3R Solutions has developed systems around reusable pail collection, decontamination and cleaning, quality inspection, traceability through digital IDs, and closed loop reuse models for industrial packaging. So Rahul brings extensive execution level expertise and practical implementation insights, especially for sectors such as paints, coatings, adhesives, chemicals, and industrial packaging. His session today will help participants understand what real reuse implementation actually looks like beyond the regulatory language. With that, we are now ready to begin the first segment of today's webinar. And Sujan, thank you once again for joining us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Arushi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. I understand it's a holiday today, and I am very happy with the participation which has happened. So yes, firstly, understanding the journey of how reuse obligation came into picture, and before that, understanding the meaning of reuse. So the reuse, as per the definition given in the plastic waste management rules, means using an object or a resource material again for either the same purpose or another purpose without changing the object's structure. This is the definition which is given in the plastic waste management rules. The reuse obligations were first introduced in the plastic waste management rules through the amendment dated 16 February 2022, wherein firstly, the EPR, the reuse obligations were introduced. The container capacities were divided into two broad capacities. First was containers having container capacity more than or equal to 0.9 liter, but less than 4.9 liter or kg. And the second was containers having container capacity more than or equal to 4.9 kgs or liters. The exemption at the first was only subject to FSSI regulation. Then there was a draft amendment which was issued on 3rd June 2025, wherein an additional category of containers were introduced, which was containers having container capacity greater than or equal to 4.9 liters used for packaged drinking water. There were some target reductions also proposed in that particular draft, and there was additional criteria introduced for exemption. So obviously the FSSI regulations state that way, the exemptions, but there was also two exemptions which were introduced, which were statutory requirements and technical requirements. And there was also a provision for carry forward of targets. Then on 31st of March 2026, these amendments were finalized. Amending the Plastic Waste Management Rules 2016 were introduced. We will take you through the brief of all the points. There are 5 points which are there in the reuse. We will take you through each of the points and its implication. But basically what happened was the additional category which was introduced was considered and finalized. Target reductions were actually carried forward. Carry forward was permitted, but with some restriction. Exemptions were again revamped, and the methodology to calculate reuse was scrapped. So this is the whole journey of how the reuse has matured over time. There are a lot of questions, I understand, but this is the current status of the regulation. Next slide, please, Arushi. Okay. So first of all, the reuse obligation is only applicable to brand owners. As we discussed in the last slide, there are 3 categories: containers having container capacity less than or equal to 0.9 liter or kg, but but not more than 4.9 liters or kg. Then there is the another two categories wherein the container capacity is greater than or equal to 4.9 liters or kg, wherein there is a bifurcation where the packaged drinking water has been separately bifurcated and other than packaged drinking water has been kept separately. So for containers having container capacity less than 0.4 less than 4.9 liters or kg, there was no change in the targets proposed. For containers having container capacity more than or equal to 4.9 liter or kg, the targets were reduced in case of non-packaged drinking water category, wherein earlier the target was starting from 70% in 25-26. Now it has been amended to 10% and increasing gradually to 15% from 27-28. For packaged drinking water, while a new category was introduced, there was no reduction of target for them. Their target remains the same, that is 70% in 25-26. 26-27 it increases to 75%, 80%, and so on. So a particular reason maybe for this is that across the industry the containers in which the packaged drinking waters are supplied probably to our offices or in our factories, they are usually reused, and that is why the government wanted to give the incentive and ensure that the compliance where it is possible is adhered to. Now there was a whole revamp in the category of exemption. So the rule says that the reuse target shall not be applicable in case where the reuse of container category 1 capacity packaging is not permitted under any law, regulation, rules, a mandatory Indian standard, or any other statutory requirement as specified by the central government. Now, the rules, the regulations, the laws can be notified by the central government or by statutory bodies such as FSSAI, SEDESCO, or the Central Insecticide Board. So these are only examples, and they are not the only three bodies who can pass an order or who can give directions. So there could be other government statutory bodies also who could give the directions for not reusing. Then earlier what was mentioned was that the brand owners will have to take exemption from the Central Pollution Control Board. But with this amendment, what has changed is that the brand owners have to claim this exemption on a self-declaration basis. That means that they have to upload the applicable notification, statutory order or rule or regulation or BIS standard, whichever is applicable to their product, which will prohibit reuse of rigid plastic packaging. So this is a major change. Earlier, there was a lot of questions on how will CPCB approve so many applications because there is a lot of restriction. FSSAI in particular, they only allow reuse after for only more than 4.5 for only 5 liters or above. Below that, there is no exemption. But now it is based on the declaration made by the brand owner on the annual return. So maybe we can expect some changes to the annual return form for this year's plastic waste management returns. Next slide, please. Now, there was another sentence or a clause which was mentioned below the reuse table that said that if the targets are unfulfilled for the year FY 25-26, they can be carried forward for the next 3 years. That's starting from 25-26, but with the caveat that a minimum of 1/3 of the unfulfilled carry forward target in each of the 3 years should be fulfilled. So for example, let's say the target for 25-26 was 30 metric tons. In that case, the whole fulfilled target is 0 in that case. In that year, there was no target which was fulfilled. In that case, in the next year, they have to minimum fulfill the 10 metric tons. That is 1/3 of the target which was unfulfilled in FY 25-26 along with the target which is there. So bare minimum in the example which we have given, they have to complete bare minimum 45 metric tons of reuse. They can also increase this, but they cannot reduce it. If there is a reduction, then it's a non-compliance of the regulation. Additionally, there was a clause which was added that the responsibility of ensuring product quality and authenticity of the products being packed and implementation of the BIS standards is the responsibility of the concerned brand owners. Essentially, what they are trying to say is that there are a lot of apprehensions which are there with respect to reuse. That could be like counterfeiting and all of those cases. In that case, it is the responsibility of the brand owner to ensure the authenticity, and they cannot take the cover of plastic waste management rules in case of any non-compliance. Next slide, please. Then in the third clause, there was a big change, wherein earlier the clause provided the calculation methodology for reuse, wherein the total sales quantity, including reuse, was to be subtracted from the quantity procured. So for example, if you have used 100 metric tons and you have reused that 100 metric ton one time, that means your overall consumption of plastic packaging or the overall sales of plastic packaging is 200 metric tons. And let's say out of it, you have only purchased 70 or 80 metric tons of plastic packaging. In that case, that number would be reduced from your overall consumption. So 200 minus 70 plus whatever waste which has been generated at your plant. So 200 minus 70, and let's say 10 metric ton was the pre-consumer waste which was generated. In that case, the overall reuse quantity would be 200 minus 70 minus 10, that is 120 metric tons of reuse. But this methodology was somewhat flawed for the reason being that there could be a component of stock also with the brand. So that is why what they have proposed now is that the information with respect to the total sales, use of virgin as well as recycled plastic content in rigid packaging shall be reported by the brand owners in their annual return. So earlier there was a whole formula which was there, and accordingly the brand owners were also getting reuse fulfillment in their annual return. So if you check your annual returns under the reuse tab, there would be some numbers which were appearing if you had any consumption that way. But now this whole formula has been scrapped. While there is no new formula which has been given, but the dependency on material purchased has been removed. So my understanding or my interpretation of this is that the reporting on the portal will also change, and the reuse will be based on the declarations made by the brand owner rather than there being a check or reduction through the purchase. So the brand owner will have to give the declaration of how much quantity they have reused. So this again, the effect on the portal currently, as we say, the effect is not visible, but ideally there should be some change to give the effect of the same. There was a fourth point which also said that if the packaging is reused, in that case, the obligation will not be passed to the brand owner. So for example, let's say if I say my whole consumption is 200 metric tons, so my EPR target will not be calculated on the basis of that 200 tons, but only on the basis of the actual consumption or the actual introduction of packaging which was done. But this functionality over the past 3 annual return cycles, we have not seen any sort of target reduction. So the target calculation in case of use of recycled plastic as well as in case of reuse was always based on the actual formula which was there. And even if you tried to give your actual consumption, it would not be suffice since there was a validation check between your procurement and your sales. So this functionality was not seen on the portal, but it is still there in the rule. There was also point 5 wherein it said that even for 22, 23 and 23, 24, the quantity which is reused will be reduced from the total plastic packaging used under category 1. So again, the same thing here, they are saying that in the fourth point, it will be applicable for all the years. And in the fifth point, they have explicitly mentioned that for 22, 23 and 23, 24 also, this will be this criteria would be applicable. Now, in the guidance manual which was issued by the Central Pollution Control Board, they had given an audit mechanism wherein they had reported that the data related to the collection, transportation, processing prior to reuse, the cleaning mechanism, the facility inspection for cleaning of the containers, all of these things would be the verification checkpoints for verifying whether the containers have been reused or not. So, in the nutshell, what they are trying to imply is that the brand owner who is doing the reuse should have the traceability of how the containers were reused. Next slide, please. Now on the portal, while these are the earlier steps which were there, so you have to take care of what your supplier is reporting. So for example, if your rigid container supplier on the CPCB portal, he has the option to select what type of container he is supplying to you. While in the amendment, the dependency on purchase has been removed, but it could still act as a cross-check mechanism wherein let's say you are saying that we are not consuming any containers who have capacity more than 0.9 liters or kgs, but your supplier is reporting that. In the past, we have seen a lot of examples wherein the ink suppliers are transferring the obligation of the container of the ink supplied also to the brand owners. So all of those things you will have to take care while you before your submission of annual return, that your suppliers report the container capacity properly. Earlier, there was also a step while submitting the state-wise annual return, state-wise consumption report, wherein you had to give your breakup of your post and pre-consumer consumption. This was the particular place wherein, we had earlier assumed that the whole quantity of reuse, that is 100 plus 100, was to be reported. But even though that reporting was there, yeah, there was an error which was there on the portal. So what usually brand owners have done is that they have only reported the consumption which they have done, not the double consumption or the reuse component which has been done. And once you submit this particular section in the state-wise annual report, state-wise consumption, on the annual report page, you see reuse quantity, wherein let's say if your number of post consumer was 100 and your procurement was 70, so 100 minus 70 and 30 tons would have been reported as reuse, which ideally would not have been a reuse, it would have been a stock component, but that is how the portal was reporting this number under the reuse category. So this is how on the portal it is there currently. While step 2 might or might not be there, but step 1 will definitely be there. So you need to take care of what your suppliers or your registered suppliers are reporting on the portal. Next slide, please. So one key takeaway from the notice which was issued by the Central Pollution Control Board on 19 January 2026. So I have been hearing a lot from the industry that HMHDP, this particular polymer type, is being used for making huge containers, 200 liters, 210 and 209 liter containers, wherein there is no waste which the recyclers can collect, because these containers go for reuse either for secondary purpose or for primary purposes. So there is an opportunity here for such brands if they are not able to meet their Europe target because of non-availability of HMHDP granules, recycled HMHDP granules. You can also use your reuse credits for this purpose. So if you see, surplus in one category can be used for offsetting, carried forward and sale in the same category. But a surplus in reuse can be used against all the categories. So reuse is on the top of the tier, wherein a reuse credit can be used for Europe, recycling, end of life. Europe credit can be only used against Europe or recycling or end of life. Recycling can be used against recycling and end of life, and end of life can only be used against end of life. So in case if you also, let's say you are implementing your reuse solution and you find the economics to be better aligned than using the recycled granules, in that case even you can use that methodology to save cost or optimize your cost. So whenever you are doing these calculations to understand how to fulfill your obligations, do keep in mind this particular clause, which is also there in the rules. Next slide, please. So a practical way forward, First is assess your packaging portfolio to confirm, whether any of your packaging gets covered in this obligation. If your packaging is getting covered, look for the restrictions, whether, FSSAI, SEDESCO, CIB, rules for storage or manufacturing of import of hazardous chemical rules. All of those rules you have to verify, your BI standards and their quality control orders, whether somewhere there is a restriction on reuse of plastic containers. If there, then okay, you can keep that copy with you and upload it on the CPCB portal whenever the functionality is activated. If not, then start your planning for reuse. Whenever you are doing that, I'm sure Rahul will also emphasize on that you need to ensure that there should be traceability of the containers which you are using. And also there, if those containers are coming from a hazardous background, there is already a SOP by Central Pollution Control Board which is with respect to utilization of contaminated barrels, containers, drums containing hazardous waste. So while these hazardous waste, the hazardous drums can be reused, but the vendor from whom you are procuring this used containers, they should be registered with the State Pollution Control Board and should be adhering to this SOP. And lastly, ensure compliance on the portal with respect to reporting of consumption as well as procurement, because consumption is, it seems, the would be the point of deciding whether the number, whether you have reused or not, and there should be a proper backup for the same. So yeah, that is it from my end. Thank you everyone for listening. Over to you, Arush.
Thank you so much, Sujan, for that extremely insightful and detailed session. And I think the biggest takeaway from your discussion is that the reuse mandate is no longer a future concept that we were thinking about, but it is more of a measurable compliance obligation with very clear expectations around targets, reporting, documentation, and also accountability. But as we all know, compliance is only one side of the story. The next important question for industry is how do we actually execute reuse on ground? And this is exactly what our next segment is going to focus on. So I would now like to invite Mr. Rahul to take over the second segment of today's webinar. Rahul, thank you so much for joining us today, and over to you.
Uh, Thank you, Arushi. Thank you, Sujan, for setting up the context. Now coming to practical implementation of packaging reuse, we have been working with paint, lubricant, and adhesive industry to help them reuse their existing packaging. At 3R Solutions, our goal is to build a packaging reuse ecosystem that is economically viable, environmentally sustainable, and legally compliant. When it comes to packaging reuse in India, it is far more different than what we are familiar with. When it comes to existing EPR credits, we definitely benefited from the existing infrastructure. But in case of packaging reuse, there is no existing infrastructure, especially for the packaging SKU, which are less than 50 kg. So when I talk about infrastructure, I'm talking about system to take back, system to clean without damaging its material or physical properties. Another way packaging reuse that is different from EPR credit is packaging design aspect is extremely critical. Existing packaging that most of the companies are using are designed to ensure that less plastic is consumed. But when we talk about packaging reuse, we have to think about, can that packaging be used for 10, 50, 20, 100 cycles? And for that purpose, the weight of packaging might increase. That's one aspect. But the way we look at packaging, that also needs to change. So this is very critical point wherein packaging reuse differs from the existing EPR credit system. Third way it differs is traceability. How do we differentiate the reusable packaging from the existing one? So for that differentiation, traceability for each container is a must. So these are the three things that I would like to start with, how packaging reuse differs from the plastic EPR credits that we all are familiar with. Now, when it comes to packaging reuse, it means that when you as a brand owner, through your distributors or retailer, take your product to consumer, after consumer uses it, packaging reuse is about investing in infrastructure to take back that packaging, transport, clean as per the quality standard required by your industry, quality test, and again reuse that packaging. It's not only about keeping packaging in a circular model. Packaging reuse is also a unique opportunity for brand owners to have assured supply of recycled plastic, because whichever containers, high quality containers which cannot be reused, those can be recycled and brought back into the system. So packaging reuse actually is an opportunity for companies to ensure their recycled granule supply as well. Now, if we were to build a packaging reuse ecosystem, though it looks circular, it has a six major components: packaging design, logistics, cleaning, deposit refund traceability, and reporting and monitoring mechanism. By packaging design, as I mentioned earlier, I mean that we really need to see if we were to use particular packaging for 10, 50, 100 times, what are the aspects that we need to focus on. Well, it starts with the how packaging interacts with the consumer. It starts with, can packaging be clean? What are the few changes that you need to make? And it starts with the polymer that you use. So packaging design is very critical aspect of uh, doing a packaging reuse. Take back logistics. If you are focused on B2B sales, take back logistics is more or less solved problem for you, because in B2B context, since supply happens in a bulk, it is very easy to manage the logistics. The problem that needs to be solved is how do we collect packaging from retail? And for that, I think deposit refund system is a way forward, which gives enough economic incentive to consumer to return this high value packaging back into the system. Another aspect of packaging reuse, and probably today most important, is how do we ensure that cleaning and quality is as per the required standard. Cleaning and quality standards are built industry specific. For example, we are working with paint, lubricant, and adhesive industry. For each of these industry, packaging quality differs. Few of the parameters are definitely same, but there are many parameters that differs from industry to industry. So this part needs to be really worked closely if we really want to reuse the packaging. On traceability, reporting and monitoring tech, since we want to ensure that packaging is differentiated from reusable versus the new packaging. So each packaging needs to have a unique code or unique identifier which has information regarding when that packaging was brought into the market, when it was collected, clean, first reuse cycle, second reuse cycle, so that when it comes to reporting or proving that packaging reuse is happening, you have ready to download reports with you when it comes to packaging reuse. So in a nutshell, if we really want to build packaging reuse ecosystem, these are the six components that we need to solve for. Out of these six components, we are already solved for four components, except the retail take back logistics. Now, coming to our work with the companies, which most of you would be very much interested. So, for today's session, I will be running you through the paint industry example, how we operationalize packaging reuse for the paint industry. So, for our operationalization, three components we were when we collaborated with the paint industry, we looked at three components. How do we take back how do we clean, and how do we ensure that there is a traceability and reuse that are there. For take back logistics, it is very important that there is a alignment with the sales team who speaks with your customer. In case of paint company, this particular paint company introduce us to their sales team, brief the sales team that this is the legal mandate and we must do it. Eventually, it is going to be part of your KPIs as well. These salesperson in turn introduce us to the key contractors. So the pilot that we are doing with the paint companies is focused on the bulk buyers, the project sites or bigger painting contracts that are there. So salesperson introduce us to the bigger paint contractors. We negotiated with the paint contractor regarding the buyback price of the bucket. We finalized those rates, and then whenever contractor has a sufficient quantity of buckets, contractor calls us and we arrange for the pickup. And that's how we collect the buckets and bring it to our factory. When buckets come to our factory, for paint industry, there are a lot of issues that we needed to solve for cleaning. So, for example, we had to solve for different type of paints based on what application you have. Paint chemistry changes. So we had to design a process wherein all type of paints can be removed. When it comes to branding artwork, many companies use different types of branding artwork. For example, a particular A company would use dry offset, B company would use screen, C company would use heat transfer label. So we had to solve for how do we design a system which can remove all type of printings. Also, when it comes to paint industry, it was very clear that paint container must not have any biological residue. So we had to design our process in order to ensure that there is no biological residue on a paint container. And most importantly, since paint is filled on a fast filling lines, we had to ensure that each of the container doesn't have a shape deformity. So we had to solve for these four major issues when it came to paint industry, and we did solve for this paint industry through our designing 5-step cleaning process wherein we are pre-processing and rejecting the containers that are damaged. Then we are removing the paint, residual paint that is on inside and outside of the bucket. On a third stage, we are removing the branding artwork using our proprietary chemicals. In fourth process, we are drying the buckets, and we are not only drying, we are bone drying. We are using a bone dry method, which ensures that there is absolutely no moisture on a surface of a plastic container. And fifth and final is quality testing. So apart from visual inspection, we do leak, odor, and microbial activity tests. So this 5-step process ensures that paint companies get reusable bucket, which is meeting all their quality requirements. So in previous slides, you saw the contaminated paint container, and this is the output. This is output after our cleaning process. So it doesn't have any biological presence. It is suitable for different type of branding artwork, and container passes the physical properties required by the industry. In the next slide, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a glimpse of de-inking process. So this machine is being developed by us internally to de-ink the containers. Within 45 seconds, as you will see, complete branding artwork can be removed from the surface of the container. Our cleaning process as well as the de-inking process is protected by intellectual property. One patent has already been granted and another patent is in process. So as you can see, complete removal of branding artwork has happened. And on the same container, you will be able to see that same container can be rebranded. And we did this testing for multiple companies, and result remains more or less consistent. So before dispatching these containers, we provide 11-digit unique code to each container. This code has information regarding the location of the container pickup, date of the container pickup, quality, cleaning date of the container, and dispatch date of the container. So when you scan this code, you will be able to get all the information. So before dispatch of the container, each container is given this unique 11 character code to ensure that life cycle can be tracked. So to summarize, we have worked with the paint company on three principles: recover, recondition, and reuse. Paint company shared their distribution data. Based on that, we have set up a take back channel and transportation management. In reconditioning part, which is our core part, we manage cleaning, quality testing, and unique digital ID for traceability. And in reuse, which is managed by brands, we supply the paint, brands repack their product and manage the life cycle journey of the paint container. So this is what we have been able to achieve in past 2.5 years. We achieved this through our R&D, but when it comes to benefits, packaging reuse has economic as well as environmental benefits. Existing packaging design might not be suitable, and that's why packaging that can last for reuse cycles needs to be created. And we created such packaging for paint industry, which is definitely consumes more plastic to make. But if you look at over its life cycle, this packaging can save more than 8 kg of the virgin plastic or the recycled plastic content. So initially, definitely, when it comes to reusable packaging, weight will be higher. But since same packaging will be used multiple times, if you look at life cycle of the packaging, you can save and reduce plastic consumption significantly. Packaging reuse is also economically beneficial. So this is again the thought experiment that we ran for paint industry, wherein for existing cost, we mapped the existing cost of the paint pail that is there, and uh, against that, we mapped the reuse cost. So over a life cycle of packaging, reuse cost is about 11% lesser compared to the making new packaging each time you want to introduce your product into the market. Again, these are thought experiment, industry specific changes will be there, SKU specific changes will be there. I just wanted to demonstrate that packaging, when we talk about packaging reuse, we always think that अरे plastic consumption बढ़ेगा, पैसा ज़्यादा लगेगा. But if you look at life cycle, our assumption is wrong. Plastic consumption will be reduced and companies will save the money. I wanted to drive this point. I will not worry with this. So this is our facility in Pune. This facility is approved by Maharashtra Pollution Control Board. It has a hazardous waste authorization and it has a zero liquid discharge system as well. We can do about 180,000 containers at this facility in Pune. Just to conclude, I would like I would like you to take one single message that packaging reuse is a journey that is economically viable and environmentally sustainable. Thank you so much for joining today. We'll be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rahul. That was a very practical and insightful session. And I believe what made this segment particularly valuable was the fact that it showed the audience that reuse is not just a theoretical or a sustainability concept, but it is actually operationally achievable when you set up a right ecosystem, logistic, cleaning infrastructure, quality assurance systems, and traceability mechanisms are in place. And also the examples that you shared around take back logistics, reusable paint containers, decontamination process, digital tracking systems. These really help bring the mandate into a practical business context. So together, if I club both the sessions today, so they have provided a very strong perspective from true, from two extremely important angles, one being your compliance, another being your execution. And I think that combination is exactly what industry stakeholders need right now. So with that, our both the segments are over. As we come to the end of the today's webinar, I would once again like to sincerely thank all the participants for joining us and spending your valuable time with us today. And a very special thanks to Mr. Sujain Jain for simplifying all the regulatory and compliance frameworks around the reuse mandate, and Mr. Rahul for sharing such valuable on-ground implementation insights and the real-world industry examples and what 3R Solutions is actually doing on the ground. Today's discussion clearly highlighted that reuse is going to become a very important pillar of India's circular economy transition, and all the organization they need to begin preparing early, that will be significantly better positioned from both compliance point of view and also the operational standpoints. We hope today's session helped provide clarity, direction, and actionable insights for your organization's reuse journey. And thank you for such thoughtful questions. And for any other queries, support requirements, or discussions around EPR compliance, reuse implementation, packaging strategy, or any kind of operational advisory around EPR, please feel free to reach to ReCirculytics teams. Thank you once again, everyone. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Sujain. And have a wonderful evening ahead. And we look forward to staying connected with all of you. And goodbye and thank you.
Thank you,
all.
everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.